Desperate mother flees with her daughter to a deserted island, and what they find there is unbelievable. Jennifer Miller never imagined she would reach the point of stealing an old boat to flee with her own daughter. Her hands trembled as she held the wheel of the vessel she had found docked at the small port of Malibu on the California coast. "Mommy, why are we leaving so early?" asked 8-year-old Emily, rubbing her sleepy eyes. The girl wore a light blue dress that Jennifer had hastily chosen the night before. "We're going on a special trip, my love, just the two of us," replied Jennifer, trying to keep her voice steady as she navigated through the dark waters of dawn. What Emily didn't know was that in a few hours, social workers would be knocking on their door to take her away. The court decision had been finalized the day before. David, her ex-husband, and Amanda, his new wife, had convinced the judge that Jennifer was an unstable mother, incapable of caring for her daughter. The accusations still echoed in Jennifer's mind like a cruel melody: emotional neglect, anxiety attacks, unsuitable environment, words she would never associate with herself, but which now appeared in official documents determining her fate. "Where are we going, Mommy?" insisted Emily, noticing the tension on her mother's face. "To a very beautiful place, where we can be together and no one will bother us," said Jennifer, pointing to a small island taking shape on the horizon. She had researched Hope Island for weeks. According to the old maps at the public library, it was an isolated piece of land with no inhabitants, located about 2 hours' sail from the coast. It would be the perfect hiding place until she could find a way to prove her innocence. The boat's engine made a strange noise, but Jennifer had no choice. It was that old vessel, or losing Emily forever. Over the past few months, David and Amanda had been building a meticulous case against her. Photos taken out of context, statements from ill-intentioned neighbors, medical reports she had never requested. "Mommy, are you crying?" asked Emily, noticing the tears streaming down Jennifer's face. "It's just sea spray, sweetie," lied Jennifer, wiping her face with the back of her hand. The truth was that her heart was shattered. In less than a year, her life had completely fallen apart. The messy divorce, losing her teaching job at the school, and now custody of Emily. David had orchestrated every move with the precision of an experienced chess player. Jennifer remembered the day everything began to change. David had come home accompanied by Amanda, introducing her as his new business partner. It was obvious there was something more between them, but Jennifer tried to ignore the signs, until she discovered the messages on his phone 3 months later. "Look, Mommy, dolphins!" shouted Emily, pointing to a group of mammals leaping near the boat. Jennifer smiled for the first time in weeks. At least Emily was having fun. The girl had always been good at finding joy in small things, a quality Jennifer admired and tried to protect at all costs. The sun began to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Under other circumstances, it would be a magical moment to share with her daughter, but Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a terrible mistake. What if the boat broke down? What if they got lost at sea? What if someone discovered them? The questions pounded in her head like relentless rain. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "Mommy, is that noise normal?" asked Emily, hearing the engine coughing louder and louder. Jennifer felt her stomach turn to ice. The engine was failing, exactly as she had feared. Black smoke began pouring from the back of the boat, and the smell of burnt oil filled the air. "Stay calm, sweetheart. I'll try to fix it," said Jennifer, trying to keep her voice steady. She knew nothing about engines, but she tried fiddling with the exposed wires and tubes. Her hands trembled not just from nerves, but also from the morning chill cutting through her thin blouse. "Are we going to sink?" asked Emily with the typical innocence of an 8-year-old. "Of course not, honey. Boats are made to float," replied Jennifer, forcing a smile as she continued trying to get the engine to work. After several failed attempts, Jennifer gave up. They were adrift, halfway between the coast and the island. The sea was relatively calm, which was lucky, but the situation was still dangerous. "Let's use the oars," decided Jennifer, grabbing the 2 old oars at the bottom of the boat. "Can I help?" asked Emily, always willing to pitch in. "You can keep watch and let me know if you see anything interesting in the sea," said Jennifer, starting to row with all her strength. The task was much harder than she had imagined. Her arms ached after just a few minutes, and progress toward the island was slow and painful. But she couldn't give up, not when she was so close to securing some alone time with Emily. During the struggle against the current, Jennifer began to reflect on the past few weeks. How had David managed to manipulate so many people? How had his lawyer built such a convincing case based on lies? She remembered the hearing at the courthouse 3 days earlier. David and Amanda sitting side by side, dressed impeccably, with rehearsed expressions of concern. On the other side, Jennifer alone with a lawyer she barely knew who seemed more interested in wrapping up the case quickly than in defending her. "Your Honor, the respondent has demonstrated erratic and unstable behavior in recent months," David's lawyer had said. "We have medical reports here that prove episodes of severe anxiety and depression, which directly affect her ability to care for the minor." Jennifer had tried to defend herself, explaining that the reports were based on a single medical consultation she had during a moment of stress, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. "Mommy, you're rowing really slowly," observed Emily. "Sorry, sweetie. I was thinking about other things," said Jennifer, refocusing on the task. The sun was higher when they finally managed to approach the island. Jennifer sighed with relief upon seeing the strip of white sand bordering the small piece of land. From what she could see, there was dense vegetation inland, which would be good for hiding. But when they were just a few yards from the beach, Emily pointed at something that made Jennifer's heart stop. "Mommy, look! There's smoke coming from those trees." Jennifer followed her daughter's finger and saw a thin column of grey smoke rising among the treetops. Someone was on the island. Her supposedly deserted island had inhabitants. "What do we do now?" asked Emily, noticing her mother's hesitation. Jennifer looked around. Going back wasn't an option, not with the broken engine and her arms already exhausted from rowing. Heading in another direction would mean getting lost in the ocean. The only alternative was to land and find out who the other occupants of the island were. "Let's go meet our neighbors," said Jennifer, trying to sound more confident than she felt. They beached the boat on the sand and stepped onto the shore. The feeling of solid ground beneath her feet brought a moment of relief, but Jennifer kept all her senses alert. She grabbed the small backpack with her few belongings and held Emily's hand firmly. The path through the vegetation was easier than she expected. Someone had cleared a rough trail between the trees, which confirmed that the island indeed had inhabitants. Jennifer could hear the sound of running water somewhere nearby and the songs of unfamiliar birds. After a few minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing where a simple hut made of wood and coconut palm leaves stood. Smoke rose from an improvised chimney, and there was a neat vegetable garden beside the structure. "Is anyone there?" shouted Jennifer, keeping Emily behind her. The hut door opened slowly, and a woman with greying hair, appearing to be about 65 years old, emerged. She wore simple, clean clothes, and her face showed more curiosity than hostility. "Are you lost?" asked the woman, approaching slowly. "Our boat broke down," explained Jennifer. "We didn't know anyone was here." "Few do," said the woman with a gentle smile. "I'm Margaret Wilson. And you?" "Jennifer, and this is my daughter Emily," replied Jennifer, still keeping some distance. "It's nice to have company," said Margaret. "It's been a long time since I've seen a child around here. Are you running from something?" The direct question took Jennifer by surprise. There was something in Margaret's calm and straightforward manner that suggested a person accustomed to dealing with complicated situations. "Why do you ask that?" questioned Jennifer, becoming defensive. "Because I am too," Margaret replied simply. "And usually, people only end up here when they have nowhere else to go." Emily hid further behind her mother, frightened by the strange conversation between the two adult women. Jennifer noticed her daughter's discomfort and tried to change the tone of the conversation. "How long have you been living here?" asked Jennifer. 3 years, Margaret answered. "I came here when my own family tried to have me committed against my will." "Committed?" repeated Jennifer, surprised. "My children wanted to put me in a nursing home to get my inheritance," Margaret explained bitterly. "They hired corrupt doctors who would certify my mental incapacity. When I discovered the plan, I took what little I could carry and came here." Jennifer felt a knot in her stomach. Margaret's story was frighteningly similar to her own situation. Manipulative families, questionable medical documents, people trying to take what wasn't theirs. "And how do you survive here alone?" asked Jennifer. "I have a small garden. I collect fruits and fish. Fishermen pass by here from time to time, and I trade some things for supplies," Margaret explained. "It's not an easy life, but it's free." "Can I see the little fish?" asked Emily timidly, drawn by the mention of fishermen. "Of course, dear," said Margaret, crouching down to the girl's level. "There's a stream right over there where I sometimes catch small fish." Jennifer watched the interaction between Margaret and Emily. There was something genuinely maternal in the way the older woman treated her daughter, very different from the falseness she always sensed in Amanda. "You can stay here tonight," offered Margaret. "Tomorrow we'll see what to do about your boat." "Thank you," said Jennifer, "but we don't want to be a bother." "No bother at all," said Margaret. "It's good to have company. And this little one needs a safe place to sleep." While Margaret showed them the hut, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about the similarities between their stories. Two women fleeing manipulative families, two women the system had failed to protect. The hut was small but organized. There was a simple bed, a rough table, some pots and basic kitchen utensils. Margaret had built a modest but functional life on the island. "How did you manage to get all these things?" asked Jennifer, admiring the organization. "Little by little," explained Margaret. "I brought some things with me, others I got from the fishermen, and some I made with my own hands." "You made this table?" asked Emily, running her hand over the smooth wooden surface. "Yes, I did, dear," said Margaret proudly. "I learned many things I never thought I could do." Jennifer admired the older woman's strength and independence. Margaret had turned a desperate situation into an opportunity to start over, something Jennifer wasn't sure she'd have the courage to do. "Have you eaten today?" asked Margaret. "We haven't had time," admitted Jennifer, realizing how hungry she was. "I'll prepare something," said Margaret, heading to the small kitchen. "Emily, do you like bananas?" "I love them," Emily replied excitedly. While Margaret prepared a simple meal, Jennifer left the cabin to check if the boat was secure on the beach. She also wanted a moment alone to process everything that was happening. The view of the beach was breathtaking. Crystal clear waters stretched as far as the eye could see, and the sound of the waves had an almost hypnotic effect. Under other circumstances, it would be a tropical paradise. But Jennifer couldn't relax. Every passing minute was another minute for David and Amanda to consolidate their victory. They had probably already discovered that she and Emily had disappeared. They were probably organizing a search already. When she returned to the cabin, she found Emily helping Margaret cut fruits. Her daughter seemed more relaxed than she had been in weeks, and that brought some relief to Jennifer's troubled heart. "Margaret was telling me about the island's birds," Emily said excitedly. "She said there's one that sings like a flute." "It's the striped flycatcher," explained Margaret. "They're very common around here." Jennifer sat at the table and accepted the plate of fruits and grilled fish that Margaret offered her. The food was simple but tasty, and she realized how hungry she was. "Jennifer," said Margaret after a few minutes of silence, "may I ask what exactly you're running from?" Jennifer hesitated. Telling her story to a stranger seemed risky, but there was something about Margaret that inspired trust. Perhaps it was the fact that she herself had a similar story. "My ex-husband got custody of Emily," Jennifer finally said. "He and his new wife built a false case against me." "False how?" asked Margaret. "They said I was unstable, that I couldn't take proper care of Emily. They presented medical reports based on a single appointment I had during a stressful period." Margaret shook her head knowingly. "I'm familiar with those tactics," she said. "They used something similar against me." "His lawyer was very good," Jennifer continued. "He managed to turn normal moments of stress into evidence of mental instability. And you couldn't defend yourself." "I tried, but it seemed like everything I said just confirmed the image they had created of me." Emily had stopped eating and was paying attention to the conversation, though it was clear she didn't fully understand what was being discussed. "Mommy, why did Daddy want to take me away?" Emily asked innocently. Jennifer felt her heart tighten. How to explain to an 8-year-old the complexities of a manipulated custody dispute? "Sometimes adults argue about important things," Jennifer said carefully, and they end up making decisions that aren't the best for everyone. But I like living with you, Emily said simply. I also enjoy being with you, my love, said Jennifer, hugging her daughter. Margaret watched the interaction with interest. As someone who had lost her relationship with her own children due to greed and manipulation, she understood the value of a genuine bond between mother and daughter. Jennifer, can I give you some advice? Said Margaret. Of course, Jennifer replied. Running away solves the immediate problem, but not the root cause. At some point, you'll have to face the situation head-on. But how? They have documents, lawyers, money. I have nothing. You have the truth, said Margaret, and sometimes that's more powerful than you think. The truth wasn't enough in court, Jennifer said bitterly. Because maybe you didn't have the right people on your side, Margaret suggested. Jennifer fell silent, thinking about Margaret's words. There was something in the way the older woman spoke that suggested experience in legal matters. Did you work in law? Asked Jennifer. Margaret hesitated for a moment. I worked in the judicial system for many years, she finally said. I retired as a clerk at the courthouse. So you know about these things, Jennifer said with renewed interest. I know a bit, Margaret admitted modestly, and I can tell you that cases like yours are more common than you think. Emily had finished eating and was exploring the cabin, playing with some handmade objects Margaret had made. What do you think I should do? Asked Jennifer. First, you need time to think clearly, said Margaret. Desperate escapes rarely lead to good decisions. But every day I spend here is another day they have to consolidate their position. Or it's another day for you to truly understand what happened and how to reverse it, Margaret countered. Reverse it? Do you think that's possible? It's always possible as long as you have the right information and the right people. Jennifer felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe there was a way to fight David and Amanda within the system instead of running from it. Margaret, can I tell you all the details of what happened? Jennifer asked. Of course, said Margaret, we have time. And Jennifer began to tell the whole story, from the beginning of her relationship with David, through the marriage, Emily's birth, the first signs of trouble, the discovery of the affair, the messy divorce, and finally the custody battle. Margaret listened attentively, asking specific questions about dates, documents, and people involved. Her questions were precise and showed deep knowledge of the legal system. That lawyer of your ex-husband, Margaret said after hearing the whole story. What was his name? Attorney Richard Anderson, said Jennifer. Richard Anderson, Margaret repeated thoughtfully. Familiar name. Do you know him? I may have heard of him. There are stories circulating at the courthouse about lawyers who use questionable methods. What kind of methods? Forging documents, bribing witnesses, pressuring doctors to provide biased reports. Jennifer felt a mix of anger and hope. Anger at having been a victim of these practices, and hope at having found someone who recognized them. But how do we prove it? Asked Jennifer. It's difficult, but not impossible, said Margaret. It requires careful investigation and the right people on your side. What people? Honest prosecutors, competent investigators, lawyers specialized in judicial corruption. I don't have money to hire people like that, Jennifer said. It's not always about money, Margaret said mysteriously. Sometimes you just need to know the right people. Jennifer was about to ask what Margaret meant by that, but Emily came running back to them. Can I play on the beach? Asked Emily. Not for now, sweetie, said Jennifer. Stay close to us. But it's safe, said Margaret. There's no one else on the island besides the three of us. Are you sure? Asked Jennifer. Absolutely, confirmed Margaret. I've lived here for 3 years and have never seen anyone besides the fishermen who come by once a week. When will they come by next? Asked Jennifer, thinking about the possibility of returning to the mainland. They should show up in 4 days, said Margaret. Jennifer did the math in her head. 4 days on the island, 4 days to decide what to do, 4 days that David and Amanda would have to look for them. Do you think they can find us here? Asked Jennifer. It's unlikely, said Margaret. Very few people know about this island's existence, and even if they do, it's not easy to get here. We hope you're right, said Jennifer. Can I go play on the beach now? insisted Emily. You can go, but don't go too far, Jennifer finally said. Emily ran excitedly to the beach, happy to explore a new and interesting environment. She's a special girl, observed Margaret, watching Emily play in the sand. She is, Jennifer agreed proudly. Sometimes I think she understands things better than adults themselves. Children have a purer perception of situations, said Margaret. They sense when something is wrong, even without fully understanding. Emily always had trouble with Amanda, admitted Jennifer. Even before I found out about the affair, she said she didn't like Daddy's new aunt. Children sense falseness, said Margaret. It's an instinct we adults often lose. I should have paid more attention to the signs, Jennifer said with regret. Don't blame yourself, advised Margaret. When we're in difficult situations, we can't always see clearly. Jennifer and Margaret spent the rest of the afternoon talking and watching Emily play on the beach. The girl had found several pretty shells and was building an elaborate sandcastle. When the sun began to set, Margaret prepared another simple meal, and they ate while watching the spectacle of the sky's colors reflected in the ocean. It's beautiful, said Emily, admiring the sunset. It is, Jennifer agreed, feeling more relaxed than she had in months. Every day the sunset is different, explained Margaret. I never get tired of watching it. Don't you miss the city? Asked Jennifer. At first I did, admitted Margaret, but over time I realized that simple life has its advantages. What advantages? Peace of mind, connection with nature, time to reflect on what really matters. And your family, do you miss them? Margaret was silent for a moment. I miss my children, but not the greed and falseness that took over them, she finally said. Jennifer understood. Sometimes it was necessary to distance ourselves from the people we love to protect our own sanity. When it got dark, they went into the cabin. Margaret had prepared an improvised bed on the floor for Jennifer and Emily to sleep. Thank you for everything, said Jennifer. You saved our lives today. You saved mine too, said Margaret. It's good to have company. Emily fell asleep quickly, exhausted by the day's adventures, but Jennifer stayed awake for hours, listening to the island's nighttime sounds and thinking about everything Margaret had said. Maybe there really was a way to fight David and Amanda. Maybe escape wasn't the only option. Maybe, with Margaret's help, she could find a way to legally regain custody of her daughter. But first, she needed to understand exactly how she had been manipulated, and for that, she needed more information about attorney Richard Anderson and his questionable methods. The next morning, Jennifer woke to the sound of unfamiliar voices outside the cabin. Her heart immediately raced. Someone had found the island. Margaret, she whispered, shaking the older woman sleeping in the bed. There are people outside. Margaret woke instantly, with the quickness of someone used to dangerous situations. How many voices? She asked in a whisper. 2, at least, replied Jennifer. It must be the fishermen, said Margaret, relaxing. Sometimes they come early. Are you sure? I'll check, said Margaret, getting up carefully. Jennifer gently woke Emily and asked her to stay very quiet. The girl, still sleepy, obeyed without asking questions. Margaret peeked through the small cabin window and confirmed they were the familiar fishermen, 2 middle-aged men who had been visiting the island for years. It's Jack and Mike, explained Margaret. Trustworthy people. Jennifer felt relief, but also worry. If the fishermen saw her with Emily, they might ask questions or spread the news that there were other people on the island. Will they stay long? Asked Jennifer. They usually stay a few hours, do some fishing, rest, and then leave, explained Margaret. Do you think they'll ask about us? I can talk to them and explain that you're relatives of mine who came to visit, suggested Margaret. Would you do that? Of course, said Margaret, but you need to stay hidden until I'm sure how they'll react. Jennifer and Emily stayed inside the cabin while Margaret went out to greet the fishermen. Through the thin wooden wall, they could hear the conversation. Miss Margaret, how are you? Said a male voice. Fine, Jack, and you? All good. We brought those supplies you asked for. Thank you. I'll need a few more things this time. Do you have visitors? Asked another voice. My niece and her granddaughter came to see me, Margaret explained naturally. That's great. It's been a while since you've had company. It's true. They'll be staying a few days. Do you need anything special? Maybe some fresh fruit if you have any. Jennifer was impressed by Margaret's ease in lying. The older woman had protected their identities without hesitation. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with the fishermen sharing news from the city and Margaret asking for some extra supplies. When they left, Jennifer and Emily were able to come out of the cabin. "Thank you," said Jennifer. "You protected us without even knowing me well." "I know enough," Margaret said simply. "I can recognize a desperate mother trying to protect her daughter." "Will the fishermen be back?" "Not before next week," said Margaret. "Now we can relax." Emily had been a little scared by the need to hide, but Margaret quickly distracted her by showing some special shells she had collected over the years. "This one is very rare," explained Margaret, showing an unusually shaped shell. "I've only found 3 like it in 3 years. "Can I hold it?" asked Emily with shining eyes. "Of course, dear, you can keep it." Jennifer watched the interaction between Margaret and Emily with growing admiration. The older woman had a natural way with children, very different from Amanda's artificiality. During breakfast, which consisted of fresh fruit the fisherman had brought, Margaret resumed the conversation about Jennifer's legal situation. "I've been thinking about your case overnight," she said. "And what did you conclude?" "That there are some aspects that catch my attention." "Which ones?" "First, the speed with which everything happened. Custody processes usually take months, even years. Yours was resolved in how long?" "About 2 months," replied Jennifer. "Very quickly," observed Margaret. "That suggests there was pressure to speed up the process." "What kind of pressure?" "Political, financial, or both," said Margaret mysteriously. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us, who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Second," continued Margaret, "the medical reports that were used against you, you said they were based on a single appointment." "That's right," confirmed Jennifer. "I saw the doctor because I was going through a difficult time, right after discovering David's betrayal." "And did this doctor know your ex-husband?" "I never thought about that," admitted Jennifer. "Why do you ask?" "Because honest doctors don't make conclusive reports based on a single appointment, especially for legal proceedings." Jennifer felt a chill down her spine. She was beginning to realize she had been the victim of a much more elaborate manipulation than she had imagined. "Third," said Margaret, "the issue of your ex-husband's lawyer. Richard Anderson has a controversial reputation in legal circles. Do you actually know him?" "I came across a few cases involving him when I still worked at the courthouse," explained Margaret. "There were always rumors about his methods." "What kind of rumors?" "Forgery of documents, buying witnesses, influence over some corrupt judges." "But if that's known, why hasn't he been punished?" "Because there's never been concrete evidence," said Margaret. "He's very clever at covering his tracks." Jennifer absorbed this information with a mix of anger and hope. Anger at having been manipulated so elaborately, and hope because perhaps there was a way to expose the truth. "What can I do?" asked Jennifer. "First, you need a competent and honest lawyer," said Margaret. "I don't have the money to hire a good lawyer." "That's not always necessary," said Margaret enigmatically. "What do you mean?" "I know some professionals who work out of conviction, not just for money." "Do you still have contacts in the legal field?" Margaret hesitated for a moment. "A few," she finally admitted. "People I trust and who trust me." "Would you help me get in touch with these people?" "I can try," said Margaret. "But first, I need to be absolutely certain that your version of the facts is true." "Of course it's true," said Jennifer, offended. "I don't doubt you," Margaret explained calmly. "But if we're going to involve other people, I need to be sure of every detail." "What do you want to know?" "Everything. From the beginning. Every conversation, every document, every person involved." Jennifer spent the next few hours telling her story in meticulous detail. Margaret took notes in an old notebook and asked about specific aspects that Jennifer hadn't even considered important. Meanwhile, Emily was exploring the island with the typical curiosity of a child. She had found a small stream and was playing with the little fish swimming in its crystal-clear waters. "Mummy, can I catch a little fish?" shouted Emily. "Let them swim, dear," replied Jennifer. They're happier in the water." "Okay," said Emily, content to just watch. Margaret smiled as she observed the interaction between mother and daughter. "Your daughter is very obedient," she commented. "She's always been a calm girl," said Jennifer proudly. "She's never given me any trouble." "That must have made your defense in the case much easier," said Margaret sarcastically. "What do you mean?" "A well-behaved and happy child is evidence of good motherhood," explained Margaret. "The fact that David managed to convince the judge otherwise shows how manipulated the case was. So you really think there's a chance to reverse the decision?" "I think there's a chance to expose the corruption," said Margaret. "If we achieve this, the reversal will be a natural consequence. But how do we expose something done in the shadows?" "All corruption leaves traces," said Margaret. "The question is knowing where to look." "And do you know where to look?" "I have some ideas," Margaret said mysteriously. That afternoon, while Emily was napping in the shade of a tree, Margaret revealed more details about her past and her knowledge. "Jennifer, there's something I haven't told you about myself," she said. "What?" "I wasn't just a clerk at the courthouse." "What were you then?" "I was a judge," Margaret revealed. "I retired as a family court judge." Jennifer was shocked. Margaret was exactly the right person to help her, and fate had conspired for them to meet on the island. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Jennifer asked. "Because I didn't want to create false expectations," Margaret explained. "My past as a judge could help, but it could also complicate things." "How could it complicate?" "Because my own departure from the profession was controversial," Margaret admitted. "Controversial how?" "My children not only tried to have me committed to get my inheritance," Margaret explained. "They also tried to discredit my professional reputation, claiming I had senile dementia and had made mistaken decisions in some cases." "Was it true?" "Of course not," Margaret said firmly. "But their campaign was effective enough to raise doubts about my competence." "Is that why you came to the island?" "That's why. And because I found out that some corrupt attorneys were using my alleged mental decline to question past decisions that had harmed them." "Attorneys like Richard Anderson?" "Exactly," Margaret confirmed. Jennifer began to understand the magnitude of the situation she was in. It wasn't just a woman fleeing with her daughter. She was a piece in a much larger game of corruption and manipulation. "Margaret, do you think my case is connected to this attempt to discredit you?" "It's possible," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Richard Anderson may be using similar tactics in multiple cases. So other women might be going through the same situation as me?" "Very likely," Margaret confirmed. "That's terrible," Jennifer said, feeling a mix of outrage and solidarity. "Yes," Margaret agreed, "but it could also be our advantage." "How so?" "If we can prove a pattern of corrupt behavior, it will be much easier to reverse not just your case, but several others." "Do you have other similar cases in mind?" "I remember at least 3 cases in the last 2 years that had characteristics similar to yours. Women who lost custody of their children based on questionable evidence." "Exactly," said Margaret. "And all represented against attorneys like Richard Anderson." Jennifer felt a spark of renewed hope. If Margaret was right, her fight could help not only herself but other women in the same situation. "How can we contact these other women?" Jennifer asked. "First, we need to leave the island," Margaret said, "and that means facing the risks of returning to the mainland." "What kind of risks?" "David has probably organized a search. He may have offered a reward for information about your whereabouts." "And if we're discovered?" "If we're discovered without a solid plan, you go back to the previous situation," Margaret explained. "But if we have concrete evidence, the situation changes completely." "How do we get that evidence?" "By investigating Richard Anderson's methods," Margaret said. "And for that I need to contact people I trust." "Which people?" "A prosecutor named Miss Stephanie Johnson," Margaret said. "We've worked together on several cases, and she's always been absolutely honest." "Do you think she would help us?" "If we can prove there's a pattern of corruption involving child custody, I'm sure she'd be interested," said Margaret. "How do we contact her from here on the island?" "The fishermen return next week," explained Margaret. "I can ask them to deliver a message." "Isn't that risky?" "Yes," admitted Margaret. "But continuing to run is also risky." Jennifer pondered the options. Staying on the island indefinitely wasn't sustainable, especially with Emily. But returning to the mainland without a solid plan would be like turning themselves in. "How long do you think we'd need to gather evidence against Richard Anderson?" asked Jennifer. "If Ms. Stephanie Johnson gets involved in the case, maybe a few weeks," estimated Margaret. "She has access to investigative resources that we don't have." "A few weeks on the island? Or a few weeks hidden on the mainland?" suggested Margaret. "There are safe places where you could stay while the investigation happens." "What places?" "Shelter homes, trusted families, even other cases of women in the same situation." "Do you really think there's a support network for situations like mine?" "Informal, but yes," confirmed Margaret. "Women who've gone through similar experiences tend to help each other." Emily woke from her nap and came running over to them, interrupting the serious conversation. "Mommy, can I build another castle on the beach?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," said Jennifer, "but don't go too far." As they watched Emily playing in the sand, Jennifer made a decision. "Margaret, I want you to contact Ms. Stephanie Johnson," she said. "I'm willing to take the risk if it means getting my daughter back legally." "Are you sure?" asked Margaret. "Once we go down this path, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," said Jennifer with determination. "Running is no life for Emily. She deserves to grow up with safety and stability." "Then let's make a plan," said Margaret. They spent the rest of the day planning every detail of the strategy. Margaret would write a letter to Ms. Stephanie Johnson, explaining the situation and requesting a meeting. The fishermen would deliver the letter on their next visit. If the prosecutor agreed to help, they would leave the island to meet with her. "What if she doesn't want to get involved?" asked Jennifer. "Then we look for other options," said Margaret. "But I've known Stephanie for many years. If there's corruption involving child custody, she'll want to investigate." "I hope you're right," said Jennifer. "So do I," admitted Margaret. That night, Margaret spent hours writing the letter to Ms. Stephanie Johnson. She carefully explained Jennifer's situation, her suspicions about Richard Anderson, and the possibility of a pattern of corruption in custody cases. Jennifer read the letter before it was sealed in the envelope. "It's perfect," she said. "You have a very professional way of writing." 20 years as a judge teaches you a few things," said Margaret modestly. "Margaret, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you doing all this for us? You barely know us." Margaret stayed silent for a moment, looking out the window toward the sea. "Because I know what it's like to be betrayed by people we trust," she said finally. "And I know what it's like when the system that's supposed to protect us turns against us." "But you're taking risks," insisted Jennifer. "If you help us, it could bring unwanted attention to yourself." "I'm tired of hiding," said Margaret. "Maybe it's time to fight back. Even knowing your children might try to use this against you." "My children lost me long ago," said Margaret with sadness. "If I can use my experience to help other families, at least my pain will have served some purpose." Jennifer was moved by Margaret's generosity and courage. That woman had transformed her own tragedy into motivation to help others. "Thank you," Jennifer said simply, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet," said Margaret. "We still have a lot of work ahead." "I know, but no matter what happens, you've already done more for me and Emily than anyone else." "You've done something for me too," said Margaret. "You reminded me why I chose to be a family court judge." "Why?" "To protect children like Emily," said Margaret, looking at the girls sleeping peacefully. The next morning, Margaret woke early and went to check the beach. There was a small boat approaching the island, but it wasn't from the familiar fishermen. "Jennifer, wake up," she whispered urgently. "What is it?" asked Jennifer, immediately waking. "There's an unknown boat approaching." Jennifer felt her blood run cold. Someone had found the island, possibly someone sent by David. "What do we do?" she asked, picking up Emily in her arms. "Let's hide in the woods," said Margaret. "Quickly." They gathered their few things and ran into the dense vegetation behind the cabin. From there, they could see the beach, but remained hidden. The boat landed on the sand and 2 people got off, a man and a woman, both middle-aged, carrying heavy backpacks. "They are not people sent by your ex-husband," whispered Margaret. "How do you know?" By the way they act. They seem to be running from something, just like you. Margaret was right. The couple moved with the caution of people who didn't want to be discovered. They quickly scanned the beach and headed for the woods, clearly looking for a place to hide. "Your Honor!" the man suddenly shouted. Margaret was surprised. Someone had recognized her even after 3 years on the island. "I know that voice," she murmured. "Is it safe to come out of hiding?" asked Jennifer. "I think so," said Margaret hesitantly, "but be ready to run." Margaret slowly emerged from the vegetation, with her hands visible. "It's me," she said. "Margaret Wilson." "Miss Margaret!" exclaimed the man, running toward her. "Thank God we found you." Jennifer recognized in the man's tone the same desperation she herself had felt upon arriving at the island. This couple was also running from something. "Robert, Susan," said Margaret, recognizing the couple. "What are you doing here?" "The same as you, I imagine," said the woman named Susan, "fleeing from an impossible situation." Margaret signaled for Jennifer and Emily to come out of hiding. "These are Jennifer and Emily," Margaret introduced. "They arrived here 2 days ago." "Robert and Susan Taylor," said the man, greeting Jennifer. "Sorry for the scare." "Do you know each other?" asked Jennifer. "Robert was an accountant at City Hall for many years," explained Margaret. "I met him and Susan through some cases that came through my court." "Cases?" asked Jennifer. "Financial corruption," said Robert bitterly. "Our own son-in-law involved us in fraudulent schemes." "And now we're running from the consequences," added Susan. Jennifer immediately noticed the similarities between the couple's situation and her own. Manipulative families, elaborate schemes, innocent victims forced to flee. "How did you know about the island?" asked Margaret. "I remembered you mentioning this place years ago," explained Robert. "When the situation became unbearable, we decided to look for you." "What kind of situation?" asked Jennifer. "Our son-in-law forged documents and involved us in a fraud against City Hall," explained Susan. "When we found out, he said that if we told the truth, it would implicate our daughter too." "So you stayed silent?" asked Jennifer. "For a while," admitted Robert, "but he got greedy and started blackmailing us, demanding money and properties." "And when you refused?" "He went to the authorities first," said Susan angrily. "He presented evidence that incriminated us, but omitted his own involvement." "Are you being sought?" asked Margaret. "The city has opened an administrative process," explained Robert, "and there's a criminal investigation underway." "But are you innocent?" "Completely," said Susan. "But the evidence against us is convincing because it was carefully fabricated." Jennifer shook her head, recognizing the pattern of manipulation she herself had suffered. "It seems everyone here has been victims of the same kind of scheme," she observed. "What scheme?" asked Robert. "People close to us who use our trust against us," explained Jennifer. "They fabricate evidence, manipulate the system, and turn us into culprits for crimes we didn't commit." "Exactly," agreed Margaret. "And in every case, there are corrupt professionals involved." "What kind of professionals?" asked Susan. "Lawyers, doctors, even public officials," listed Margaret. "In our case, it was a lawyer," said Robert. "Richard Anderson." Jennifer and Margaret exchanged looks, shocked. "Richard Anderson represented your son-in-law?" asked Margaret. "Yes," confirmed Susan. "Why? Do you know him?" "He was also my ex-husband's lawyer," said Jennifer. "This can't be a coincidence," said Margaret thoughtfully. "Definitely not," agreed Jennifer. "Now we have evidence of a pattern." Margaret picked up her notebook and began asking detailed questions about Robert and Susan's case. The similarities with Jennifer's case were striking. Document forgery, evidence manipulation, using the legal system to attack innocent victims. "How many cases like this do you think Richard Anderson might have?" asked Jennifer. "Probably dozens," estimated Margaret. "If he developed a method that works, he certainly repeats it." "So there are many families suffering," said Susan sadly. "And many children being separated from their parents," added Jennifer, looking at Emily, who was playing on the beach. "Maybe it's time we do something about it," said Margaret determinedly. "How?" asked Robert. "We're all on the run. We don't have legal resources." "We have something better," said Margaret. "We have evidence and witnesses." "Witnesses?" "Us," said Margaret simply. 3 different cases, same corrupt lawyer, similar methods. It's evidence of a criminal pattern. But how do we present this evidence without turning ourselves in? Asked Susan. Through the right people, said Margaret. I was about to contact a trustworthy prosecutor. And now that we're 4 adults and 1 child, does the situation get more complicated? Asked Jennifer. Actually, it gets stronger, said Margaret. 3 independent cases are much more convincing than 1 isolated case. Robert and Susan looked hopeful for the first time in months. Do you really think there's a chance to reverse our situations? Asked Susan. I think there's a chance to expose the corruption, said Margaret. And if we manage that, all of Richard Anderson's victims will benefit. Including children who were unjustly separated from their mothers? Asked Jennifer. Especially them, confirmed Margaret. Emily chose that moment to come running back from the beach, carrying an especially beautiful shell. Mommy, look what I found, she said excitedly. How beautiful, sweetie, said Jennifer, hugging her daughter. Robert and Susan watched the interaction tenderly, remembering their own experiences as grandparents. We have grandchildren her age, said Susan, and we haven't been able to see them since this situation began, Robert added sadly. Because of your son-in-law's blackmail? Asked Jennifer. Exactly, confirmed Susan. He convinced our daughter that we're dangerous criminals. Children are always the biggest victims of these manipulations, observed Margaret. That's why we have to fight, said Jennifer determinedly, for all the children suffering because of these schemes. Margaret smiled, seeing the determination growing in Jennifer. The young mother was turning her own pain into motivation to help others. So are we all in agreement? Asked Margaret. Shall we contact Miss Stephanie and present our cases? Yes, Jennifer said immediately. We agree too, said Robert, speaking for himself and Susan. Then I'll rewrite the letter, including information about you two, said Margaret. When do the fishermen return? Asked Susan. In 3 days, replied Margaret. And if the prosecutor agrees to help us? Asked Robert. Then we'll need to leave the island and find a safe place on the mainland to coordinate the investigation, explained Margaret. That means more risks, observed Jennifer. It means we stop running and start fighting, corrected Margaret. That night, the 5 improvised accommodations in the small cabin. It was cramped, but there was a sense of camaraderie and hope that hadn't existed before. It's strange, commented Susan. 2 days ago we were desperate and alone. Now we have allies and a plan. Sometimes what seems like the end is actually the beginning, Margaret philosophized. Do you think we'll succeed? Asked Robert. I think we have a real chance, said Margaret, especially if there are other victims willing to testify. How do we find other victims? Asked Jennifer. Ms. Stephanie has access to court databases, explained Margaret. She can identify other cases with similar characteristics. What if these other cases involve people who haven't realized they've been manipulated yet? Asked Susan. Then our testimony can open their eyes, said Margaret. Jennifer looked at Emily, who was sleeping peacefully among them. Her daughter had adapted surprisingly well to life on the island, but she deserved much more than an existence as a fugitive. For Emily, murmured Jennifer, and for all the other children. For all the families that were destroyed, added Susan. And for justice, concluded Margaret. The next morning, a tropical storm hit the island. Strong winds and heavy rain forced everyone to stay inside the cabin, which swayed dangerously under nature's force. Will the cabin hold? Asked Jennifer worriedly, holding Emily, who was frightened by the noise. It's been through many storms before, said Margaret calmly, though she also looked concerned. A large branch broke from a nearby tree and hit the cabin's roof, opening a small gap through which rain began to enter. We need to cover that, said Robert, grabbing a piece of canvas. The men tried to repair the hole while the women cared for Emily and protected the few belongings they had. Mommy, I'm scared, said Emily, clinging to Jennifer. It will pass, my love, said Jennifer, hugging her daughter. Storms always pass. Margaret watched the interaction between mother and daughter and reflected on how many other children were being deprived of this kind of maternal comfort because of corrupt schemes. The storm lasted all day. When it finally passed, they discovered it had caused significant damage to the island. Several trees had fallen. Margaret's vegetable garden was destroyed and part of the beach had eroded. At least we're all okay, said Susan philosophically. And the cabin held, added Robert. But we're going to need supplies, observed Margaret. The storm destroyed a good part of our food. Will the fishermen still be able to get here? Asked Jennifer. They'll probably take a few more days, estimated Margaret. They wait for the sea to calm down completely. Then we have more time to plan, said Robert, and to think about what we're going to tell the prosecutor, added Jennifer. During the following days, the group spent a lot of time talking about their experiences and developing a coherent narrative about the pattern of corruption they had identified. We need to be very precise with dates and facts, observed Margaret. Any inconsistency could compromise our credibility. I kept some documents, said Robert. Not many, but some that could be useful. What kind of documents? Asked Margaret. Correspondence with the attorney, some contracts that I now realize were fraudulent. That's excellent, said Margaret. Physical evidence is always important. And I have the recordings of the conversations with my ex-husband, remembered Jennifer. Recordings? Asked Margaret, surprised. Yes, said Jennifer. When the fight started getting too intense, I began recording our conversations to protect myself. Do these recordings include conversations about his legal strategy? Some do, confirmed Jennifer. Mainly conversations where he admits to fabricating some accusations. Jennifer, that's crucial evidence, exclaimed Margaret. Why didn't you mention it before? I thought they wouldn't be admissible in court, said Jennifer. They might not be admitted in the original case, but they're evidence of a crime, explained Margaret. They can be used in a criminal investigation. So we have physical documents and recordings, summarized Susan, plus the testimonies of 3 independent cases. We're building a solid case, said Margaret with satisfaction. Margaret, said Jennifer hesitantly, there's something I've been thinking about. What? What if Richard Anderson has powerful connections that could hinder the investigation? That's a valid concern, admitted Margaret, but Ms. Stephanie Johnson is honest and courageous. If she takes the case, she won't be easily intimidated. But what if they try to intimidate us? Asked Susan. That's why we need a security plan, said Margaret. We can't expose ourselves unnecessarily. What kind of security plan? Asked Robert. Safe places to stay, coded communication, trustworthy people who can support us, listed Margaret. You have all that? Asked Jennifer, impressed. I have some resources, said Margaret modestly. 20 years as a judge creates many useful contacts. Emily, who had been playing by herself, approached the group. What are you always talking about? She asked with the typical curiosity of a child. About how to solve some adult problems, explained Jennifer carefully. Problems like Daddy wanting to take me away? Asked Emily. Jennifer was surprised. She thought Emily didn't fully understand the situation. Do you remember what happened, sweetie? I remember that Daddy was angry, and Aunt Amanda was saying bad things about you, said Emily. And I remember that you were very sad. What else do you remember? Asked Jennifer gently. I remember hearing Daddy talking on the phone about taking me away, said Emily. He said you couldn't take care of me properly. Margaret and the other adults exchanged glances. Emily had understood more of the situation than anyone had imagined. How did that make you feel? Asked Margaret. Confused, said Emily honestly. Because you always take care of me very well, Mommy. And do you like living with your mother? Asked Margaret. I like it a lot, said Emily. She makes the best pancakes and always reads stories to me before bedtime. Emily, said Margaret gently, if some important people asked about your life with your mother, would you be able to explain? Explain what? If you're happy, if you feel safe, if your mother takes good care of you. Of course, said Emily simply. That's easy. Jennifer felt tears in her eyes. Her daughter, with her innocence and childlike clarity, could be a powerful witness to the truth. Your Honor, said Robert hesitantly, is it appropriate to involve a child in a legal investigation? If done properly with appropriate protections, it can be, said Margaret, especially when the child is directly affected by the situation. But I don't want to traumatize Emily, said Jennifer worriedly. Neither do I, said Margaret. If we reach that point, it would be done very carefully, with specialized psychologists. How does it work? Asked Susan. The child would be heard in a protected environment, with professionals trained to make the process as stress-free as possible, explained Margaret. "And would the testimony have legal value?" asked Robert. "Yes," confirmed Margaret, "especially when it corroborates other evidence." That night, Jennifer had trouble sleeping. The idea of involving Emily in a legal investigation worried her greatly, even though she knew it might be necessary. Margaret noticed her restlessness. "Are you worried about Emily?" she asked quietly. "Very much," admitted Jennifer. "I don't want her to go through more trauma." "I understand your concern," said Margaret, "but also consider that the greater trauma would be her growing up separated from you unfairly." "You're right," said Jennifer. "It's just hard to think about exposing a child to this whole process. If we reach that point, I would be personally involved to ensure it's done as gently as possible," promised Margaret. "Thank you," said Jennifer. "Knowing I have your support makes all the difference." "Jennifer, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "In all my years as a judge, I've rarely seen a mother-daughter bond as genuine as yours," said Margaret. "Any competent professional would see that immediately." "Then why didn't the judge in my case see it?" "Because he was manipulated by false evidence and misleading arguments," said Margaret. "But now we have a chance to show the truth." "I hope it works," said Jennifer. "It will work," said Margaret with conviction. "It has to work." 2 days later, the fishermen finally appeared. Jack and Mike arrived worried about the storm's effects on the island. "Ms. Margaret, is everyone all right?" asked Jack. "We're fine," replied Margaret. "But we need some supplies. And we have a very important letter to be delivered," she added. The fishermen were surprised to discover there were now 5 people on the island, but Margaret explained that Robert and Susan were other relatives who had come to visit her. "Where is the letter going?" asked Mike. "To the city, for a prosecutor named Ms. Stephanie Johnson," said Margaret, handing over the sealed envelope. "Do you want us to deliver it personally?" asked Jack. "If possible, yes," said Margaret. "It's very important." "We'll do it," promised Jack. "We know the city courthouse." "And can you bring back a response?" asked Margaret. "Of course," said Mike. "We'll return next week." After the fishermen left with the letter, the group was left with a mixture of anxiety and hope. "Now all we can do is wait," said Susan. "And hope that Miss Stephanie is willing to help us," added Robert. "She will help," said Margaret confidently. "I know her character." "What if she asks to meet us in person?" asked Jennifer. "Then we'll have to leave the island," said Margaret, "and find a safe place for a meeting." "Do you have any idea where would be safe?" asked Susan. "A few options," said Margaret, "but let's see what her response is first." During the following week, the tension was palpable. Everyone knew the letter could change their lives, for better or for worse. Emily, noticing the adults' nervousness, tried to cheer up the group with her playful antics and discoveries on the island. She had become the small group's source of joy. "She's a special child," observed Susan, watching Emily build an elaborate sandcastle. "She is," Jennifer agreed proudly. "She's always been very perceptive and resilient." "Any court that saw her interacting with you would immediately understand that you belong together," said Robert. "We hope so," said Jennifer. Margaret spent a lot of time observing Emily and making mental notes. As a former family court judge, she knew exactly what to look for to assess a child's well-being. "Jennifer," she said one day, "I want you to know that Emily shows all the signs of a secure and well-cared-for child." "How so?" "She's confident, but not reckless. Independent, but seeks comfort when needed. Sociable, but respectful," listed Margaret. "These are characteristics of a child who has received consistent and loving care." "Would that be obvious to other professionals?" asked Jennifer. "To any competent and impartial professional, yes," confirmed Margaret. "So the problem with my case was really the manipulation of evidence." "Without a doubt," said Margaret. "Under normal circumstances, you would never have lost custody." These words brought Fernanda equal measures of relief and indignation. Relief to know she hadn't failed as a mother, and indignation at having been the victim of such a cruel scheme. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. When the fishermen returned the following week, they brought a response from Ms. Stephanie Johnson. Margaret opened the letter with trembling hands. "What does she say?" asked Jennifer anxiously. Margaret read the letter silently first, and her face gradually lit up. "She wants to meet us," she finally announced. "Is that good news?" asked Robert. "It's excellent news," said Margaret. "She says the information I sent raised important red flags." "Red flags?" asked Susan. "She had already been investigating some irregularities involving Richard Anderson," explained Margaret. "Our cases might be the evidence she needed." "So she already suspected him?" asked Jennifer. "Apparently so," confirmed Margaret, "and she wants to schedule an urgent meeting." "Where?" asked Robert. "At a safe shelter she knows," said Margaret. "A place where women and children at risk stay protected." "When?" asked Jennifer. "As soon as possible," said Margaret. "She says the investigation needs to start immediately." "Does that mean we're leaving the island today?" asked Susan. "If we can arrange transportation," said Margaret, looking at the fishermen. Jack and Mike exchanged glances. "Is this a legal situation?" asked Jack carefully. "Absolutely," said Margaret. "We're cooperating with an official investigation." "In that case we can take you," said Mike. "But our boat only fits 3 people." "Then we'll go in 2 trips," decided Margaret. "Jennifer and Emily go first, then Robert and Susan." "What about you?" asked Jennifer. "I'll go on the second trip," said Margaret. "I want to make sure everyone arrives safely." "But what if something goes wrong on the first trip?" worried Jennifer. "Nothing will go wrong," said Margaret confidently. "Ms. Stephanie is someone we can completely trust." Jennifer felt a mix of anxiety and relief. After weeks on the island, they finally had a real chance to resolve their situations. "I'm scared," she admitted. "That's normal," said Margaret, "but it's also brave to face your fear." "What if they find out where we are?" asked Jennifer. "The shelter has professional security," Margaret assured her. "You'll be protected." Jennifer looked at Emily, who was playing on the beach, unaware of the moment's importance. "Emily," she called, "come here, sweetie." "Yes, Mom?" "We're taking a trip today." "Where to?" "To meet people who will help us solve our problems," Jennifer explained carefully. "The problems with Daddy?" asked Emily. "That's right." "And after that, can we go home?" Jennifer hesitated. She didn't know what their future held, but she didn't want to lie to her daughter. "We hope so," she said honestly, "but it might take a while." "That's okay," Emily said simply. "I like adventures with you." Jennifer hugged her daughter, moved by her maturity and trust. An hour later, Jennifer and Emily boarded the boat with Jack toward the mainland. Margaret, Robert, and Susan stayed on the beach waving until the boat disappeared over the horizon. "She'll be fine," said Robert, noticing Margaret's concern. "I know she will," Margaret said. "Jennifer is stronger than she thinks." "What now?" asked Susan. "Now we wait for Mike to come back for us," said Margaret, "and we hope everything goes well." The trip back to the mainland was smooth. Emily enjoyed watching the dolphins that followed the boat, and Jennifer tried to stay calm, thinking about what awaited her. "Jack," Jennifer said during the trip, "thank you for helping us." "Don't mention it," said Jack. "Ms. Margaret is a special person. If she says you need help, you really do." "Have you known her long?" "About 4 years," said Jack, "since she showed up on the island. She's always been very kind to us." "Did she tell you why she came to the island?" "She said she had family problems," Jack said. "I didn't ask for details. Everyone has their reasons." Jennifer realized that Jack and Mike were discreet and trustworthy people, which explained why Margaret felt safe with them. "Jack, can you give me some advice?" asked Jennifer. "Sure. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, involving Emily in all this?" Jack thought for a moment. "Look, I don't understand laws and all that," he said finally, "but I see how she looks at you, and I see how you take care of her. That tells me you belong together." "Thank you," said Jennifer, feeling more confident. When they reached the mainland, a woman about 50 years old was waiting for them at the pier. She was elegant but discreet, carrying herself like someone used to authority. "Jennifer?" she asked, approaching. "Yes," Jennifer replied hesitantly. "I'm Ms. Stephanie Johnson," the woman said, extending her hand, "and this must be Emily." "Hi," Emily said shyly. "Hello, dear," Stephanie said kindly. "How about we go somewhere more comfortable to talk?" Stephanie guided Jennifer and Emily to a discreet car parked nearby. During the drive, she explained a bit about the shelter they were going to. "It's a house specialized in protecting women and children in dangerous situations," Stephanie explained. "It has professional security and all the necessary resources to ensure your safety." "How long will we stay there?" asked Jennifer. "It depends on how the investigation progresses," said Stephanie, "but while you're there, you'll be completely protected." "What about the others, Robert, Susan, and Margaret?" "I've already arranged accommodation for them too," said Stephanie. "They'll arrive in a few hours." Jennifer was impressed with Stephanie's efficiency and organization. It was clear the prosecutor took the situation very seriously. The shelter house was a discreet two-story building on a quiet residential street. From the outside, it looked like a regular home, but Jennifer immediately noticed the security cameras and other protective equipment. "Welcome," said a smiling woman who greeted them at the door. "I'm Sarah, the house coordinator." "Hi, Sarah," said Stephanie. "These are Jennifer and Emily, the ones we talked about." "Of course," said Sarah. "I've already prepared a room for you, and we have activities for children Emily's age." Emily seemed interested to learn there would be other children in the house. "Can I meet them?" she asked. "Of course, sweetie," said Sarah, "right after your mum gets settled." The room assigned to them was simple but comfortable, with a double bed and a sofa bed for Emily. There was a small table where they could eat and a window overlooking an interior garden. "It's better than I expected," Jennifer admitted. "We want you to feel at home," said Sarah, "under the circumstances." After settling in, Stephanie took Jennifer to a private room where they could talk in private. Emily stayed with Sarah, who took her to meet the other children in the house. "Jennifer," Stephanie began, "first I want you to know that I believe your version of events." "Thank you," said Jennifer, feeling relief. "Second, I want you to know you're not alone in this situation," continued Stephanie. "What do you mean?" "I've been investigating Richard Anderson for about 6 months," explained Stephanie. "I've identified at least 8 suspicious cases involving him." 8 cases. "Cases where families were destroyed by questionable evidence and rushed proceedings," said Stephanie. "Your case, Robert and Susan's, and others like it." "Does that mean there are many victims?" "Unfortunately, yes," confirmed Stephanie. "But it also means we have evidence of a criminal pattern." "What kind of evidence?" "Forged documents, purchased medical reports, paid witnesses," listed Stephanie. "It's a sophisticated judicial corruption operation." "And can you prove this?" "With your help and other victims, yes," said Stephanie. "But you need to understand this will be a long and sometimes dangerous process." "Dangerous how?" "Richard Anderson has powerful connections," explained Stephanie. "When he realizes he's being investigated, he might try to intimidate witnesses." "But will we be protected here?" "Completely," assured Stephanie. "And if necessary, we have other safe houses in different cities." Jennifer felt a mix of fear and determination. It was terrifying to know she was facing such a powerful corruption network, but it was also liberating to know she finally had someone competent on her side. "Stephanie," said Jennifer, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why are you doing all this? Why risk confronting such powerful people?" Stephanie remained silent for a moment, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Because I have a daughter Emily's age," she said finally, "and the idea that a child could be separated from her mother through lies and manipulations deeply outrages me." "Thank you," Jennifer said simply. "Don't thank me yet," said Stephanie. "We have a lot of work ahead." "What do I need to do?" "First, I need you to tell me your story, with every possible detail," said Stephanie. "Then we'll analyze the evidence you have." "The recordings?" "Mainly the recordings," confirmed Stephanie, "but also any document, email, text message that might be relevant." Jennifer spent the next 2 hours telling her story in detail to Stephanie. The prosecutor asked specific questions and took meticulous notes. "Those recordings you mentioned," said Stephanie after hearing everything. "Where are they?" "On my phone," said Jennifer. "But the phone has been off since we left home." "Good," said Stephanie. "We'll need a forensic copy of those recordings to ensure they're admissible as evidence." "How does that work?" "We have specialized technicians who can extract the recordings in a way that preserves their legal integrity," explained Stephanie. "And the other evidence? The documents from the original case?" "I've already requested copies of all your case files," said Stephanie. "I want to review every page very carefully." "Do you really think you can reverse the decision?" "I think I can do much more than that," said Stephanie. "I think I can expose the entire corruption network and ensure no other families ever go through what you've been through." Jennifer felt tears in her eyes. For the first time in months, she had real hope of getting her daughter and her life back. When they returned to where Emily was, they found the girl playing animatedly with 2 other children who were also at the shelter. "Mommy, Olivia is my age and likes the same things I do," said Emily excitedly. "That's great, sweetie," said Jennifer, happy to see her daughter adapting well. Sarah explained that Olivia and her younger brother were at the shelter because their mother had suffered domestic violence and needed protection. "Different situations, but all involving the system's failure to protect families," observed Stephanie. "It's sad how many children suffer because of adult problems," said Jennifer. "That's why we do this work," said Sarah, "to try to break these cycles." That night, Jennifer had her first good night's sleep in weeks. Knowing she was in a safe place and had competent professional support brought a peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Emily also slept well, tired from playing with the other children. Before bed, she asked if they would be staying there for long. "We don't know yet," said Jennifer honestly. "Why, aren't you liking it here?" "I am liking it," said Emily. "But I miss home." "Me too, sweetie," said Jennifer. "But sometimes we need to stay away from home for a while to be able to return safely." "Like vacation?" "Sort of," said Jennifer, finding the childish comparison both adorable and painful at the same time. The next morning, Margaret, Robert, and Susan arrived at the shelter. Jennifer was relieved to see everyone was well. "How was the second trip?" she asked. "Smooth," said Margaret. "Mike is an excellent navigator." "And how are you adapting here?" asked Susan. "Better than we expected," said Jennifer. "Stephanie is amazing." "Where is she?" asked Margaret. "She arrived early and is in a phone meeting," explained Jennifer. "She said she had important news." An hour later, Stephanie appeared with a contained expression of satisfaction. "I have good news," she announced. "What?" everyone asked at once. "I got authorization for a formal investigation," said Stephanie. "And I've already identified 6 other victims willing to testify." "That's great," exclaimed Margaret. "More than that," continued Stephanie, "one of them is the wife of a judge who was blackmailed by Richard Anderson himself." "A judge?" asked Robert, surprised. "Yes," confirmed Stephanie. "Richard tried to use compromising personal information to force favorable decisions." "And the judge agreed to report it?" asked Susan. "Not only agreed, but offered full support to the investigation," said Stephanie. "He's as outraged as we are." "This changes everything, doesn't it?" asked Jennifer. "It completely changes things," confirmed Stephanie. "With the support of an honest judge, our investigation gains credibility and resources we wouldn't have otherwise." "What are the next steps?" asked Margaret. "First, I will formally hear each of your testimonies," said Stephanie. "Then, we'll compile all the evidence and present a comprehensive report." "How long will that take?" asked Robert. "If all goes well, a few weeks," estimated Stephanie. "But I want to do a thorough job to ensure there are no loopholes in the case." "And our safety?" asked Susan. "It remains the top priority," assured Stephanie. "You'll be protected until it's safe to leave." Jennifer felt hopeful but also anxious. A few weeks felt like an eternity when you were separated from your normal life. "Stephanie," she said, "can I ask about the custody process? Is there any chance to reverse the decision before Richard Anderson is tried?" "It's possible," said Stephanie thoughtfully, "especially if we can prove the original case was based on fraudulent evidence." "How?" "By filing an appeal based on new evidence," explained Stephanie. "The recordings you have might be enough to convince an impartial judge." "An impartial judge?" asked Jennifer, catching the emphasis. "The judge who decided your original case may have been influenced or even corrupted," explained Stephanie. "We would need to take the appeal to another judge. Is that possible?" "With the right evidence, yes," said Stephanie. Over the following days, Stephanie conducted detailed interviews with each member of the group. Margaret was particularly valuable, offering legal insights that helped Stephanie better understand the tactics used by Richard Anderson. "He's smarter than I thought," admitted Stephanie after hearing all the testimonies, "but also more arrogant, and arrogance creates opportunities." What kind of opportunities? Asked Margaret. He left trails that a careful investigator can follow, explained Stephanie. Documents with inconsistent dates, suspicious medical reports, questionable payments. Do you already have access to that information? Asked Robert. I'm gradually gaining access, said Stephanie. The support from the appellate judge is opening many doors. And does Richard Anderson suspect anything? Asked Jennifer. Not yet, but that will change soon, said Stephanie. When we start questioning his former clients and associates, he'll realize he's being investigated. And then? Asked Susan. Then things could get dangerous, admitted Stephanie. That's why your safety is so important. Emily was adapting well to life at the safe house. She had befriended Olivia, and the two spent hours playing together. Jennifer was happy to see her daughter laughing and having fun, but she also felt guilty for putting the girl in that situation. She's doing fine, observed Sarah one day, seeing Jennifer watching Emily play in the garden. Are you sure? Asked Jennifer. Absolutely, said Sarah. I've worked with children for 15 years. Emily shows clear signs of emotional security, even after everything that's happened. Children are resilient, explained Sarah, and Emily knows you're fighting for her. That makes her feel protected, not abandoned. Sometimes I wonder if I should have accepted the judge's decision, said Jennifer. Maybe running away was a mistake. Jennifer, said Sarah firmly, you did what any mother would do to protect her daughter. It wasn't a mistake, it was love. Thank you, said Jennifer, feeling a little better. And besides, continued Sarah, if you hadn't run away, you never would have uncovered the corruption network. Other families might be saved because of your courage. This perspective helped Jennifer see her situation differently. Perhaps her suffering could serve a greater purpose. 2 weeks after arriving at the safe house, Stephanie appeared with a contained expression of triumph. We have a major breakthrough, she announced. What happened? Everyone asked anxiously. We obtained a recording of Richard Anderson admitting to forging documents, said Stephanie. How? Asked Margaret in amazement. One of his former clients agreed to wear a wire during a meeting, explained Stephanie. Richard boasted about his special methods to guarantee wins. Is that enough evidence to convict him? Asked Robert. It's very strong evidence, said Stephanie. Combined with everything we already have, it makes a solid case. What about my custody case? Asked Jennifer anxiously. I've already prepared the appeal, said Stephanie with a smile. It will be filed tomorrow. Tomorrow? Asked Jennifer in shock. The judge handling the appeal has already reviewed the preliminary evidence, explained Stephanie. He's as outraged as we are. Does that mean I can get Emily back? It means there's a very good chance, said Stephanie carefully. But I don't want to create unrealistic expectations. Jennifer felt a mix of hope and terror. After so many months of suffering, the possibility of officially regaining her daughter seemed almost surreal. Stephanie, said Margaret, what's the most likely scenario? If everything goes as we hope, custody will be temporarily reversed while a full investigation is conducted, explained Stephanie. What about David? Can he oppose it? Asked Jennifer. He can try, said Stephanie, but the evidence against him is overwhelming. His lawyer might advise a settlement. What kind of settlement? Supervised shared custody until the criminal case against Richard Anderson is concluded, explained Stephanie. Would that be better than the current situation? Asked Jennifer. Much better, assured Stephanie. You would regain your maternal rights, and Emily could come back to live with you. That night, Jennifer could hardly sleep. The appeal hearing would take place the next morning, and she would be there to hear the decision. Mommy, why are you awake? Asked Emily, noticing her mother tossing in bed. I'm nervous about something important happening tomorrow, explained Jennifer. Is it about us going back home? It might be, said Jennifer carefully. I'm nervous too, admitted Emily. But the good kind of nervous. Good nervous? Like when it's my birthday and I'm excited to open presents, explained Emily. Jennifer smiled, admiring her daughter's ability to find positive analogies even in difficult situations. You're very wise for an 8-year-old, she said. You always say that, said Emily, snuggling against her mother. Because it's true, said Jennifer, hugging her daughter. On the morning of the hearing, Stephanie took Jennifer to the courthouse, while Emily stayed at the shelter with Sarah. It was important that the girl not witness the legal proceedings, regardless of the outcome. "How are you feeling?" asked Stephanie during the drive. "Terrified," admitted Jennifer. "That's normal," said Stephanie. "But remember, we have very strong evidence. What if the judge doesn't accept the evidence?" "He will accept it," said Stephanie confidently. "He's already reviewed everything preliminarily and was impressed." The courthouse was practically empty, as the hearing wasn't public. Jennifer saw David sitting across the room with a lawyer she didn't recognize. "Where's Richard Anderson?" she asked. "His contract was terminated when the charges against him came to light," explained Stephanie. "David had to hire another attorney." "Is that good for us?" "Very good," confirmed Stephanie. "The new lawyer isn't familiar with the details of the corrupt methods used." When the judge entered the courtroom, Jennifer felt her heart race. He was a serious-looking man, but his eyes showed intelligence and integrity. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the judge, "this is a hearing to review the custody decision based on new evidence. Ms. Stephanie, can you present your argument?" Stephanie stood up and began to present the case meticulously and convincingly. She showed recordings of David admitting to fabricating accusations, the forged documents, and the patterns of corruption involving Richard Anderson. "Your Honor," concluded Stephanie, "the evidence clearly shows that the original decision was based on fraudulent information. The petitioner not only deserves to have her custody restored, but also deserves compensation for the damages suffered." David's lawyer tried to challenge it, but his argument seemed weak in the face of the evidence presented by Stephanie. "Your Honor," said the new lawyer nervously, "my client may have been poorly advised by his former legal representative, but that doesn't mean that—" "Mr. Taylor," interrupted the judge, "your client actively participated in the fabrication of false evidence. The recordings are clear in this regard." David was visibly uncomfortable, urgently whispering with his lawyer. "May I have a few minutes to consult with my client?" asked the lawyer. "You may have 5 minutes," granted the judge. During the break, Stephanie turned to Jennifer. "They are considering a settlement," she whispered. "Is that good?" "It depends on the terms," said Stephanie. "But the fact that they're considering a settlement shows they know they've lost." When the hearing resumed, David's lawyer asked to speak. "Your Honor, my client would like to propose a settlement that acknowledges some errors in the original process." "What kind of settlement?" asked the judge. "Primary custody for the petitioner, with supervised visitation for my client." Jennifer felt her heart burst with joy. It was more than she had dared to hope for. "Ms. Stephanie, what is the petitioner's position?" asked the judge. "We accept the proposed terms," said Stephanie immediately. "Then it's decided," declared the judge. "The custody of Emily Miller is restored to Jennifer Miller, effective immediately. David Miller will be entitled to supervised visitation at a neutral location, once a week." Jennifer began to cry with relief and joy. After months of struggle, she had finally regained her daughter officially. "Congratulations," whispered Stephanie. "You did it." "We did it," corrected Jennifer. "I never would have made it without you." Across the courtroom, David looked defeated and ashamed. He avoided Jennifer's gaze as he left the courthouse. "Stephanie," said Jennifer as they were leaving, "what happens now?" "Now you go home with Emily," said Stephanie, smiling, "and we continue the investigation against Richard Anderson." "Will he still be prosecuted?" "Oh, yes," said Stephanie determinedly. "And with the evidence we have, he'll spend a good amount of time in prison." "And the other victims?" "Their cases will also be reviewed," assured Stephanie. "Robert and Susan will likely see their situations resolved in a few weeks." When they returned to the shelter house, Emily was playing in the garden with the other children. Jennifer ran to hug her. "Emily, I have wonderful news," she said. "What? We can go home." "To our real home?" asked Emily with shining eyes. "To our real home," confirmed Jennifer. Emily began jumping for joy, infecting the other children with her excitement. "Mummy, does that mean we don't have to hide anymore?" "No, sweetie," said Jennifer. "We don't have to hide ever again." Margaret, Robert, and Susan appeared to celebrate Jennifer's victory. "Congratulations," said Margaret, hugging her. "You fought bravely." "Thank you for everything," said Jennifer. "Without you, we never would have made it." "It was a pleasure to help," said Margaret, "and knowing that other families will be protected makes it all worthwhile." "What will you do now?" asked Jennifer. "Stephanie offered me a job as a consultant in the investigation," said Margaret. "I think I'll accept." "Does that mean you're moving back to the mainland permanently?" "For now," said Margaret, "but I can always visit the island when I need peace." Robert and Susan were also optimistic about their prospects. Stephanie had indicated their cases would follow a path similar to Jennifer's. "It's amazing how our escape led us to justice," observed Susan. "Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best opportunities," philosophized Margaret. 2 days later, Jennifer and Emily left the shelter and returned to their apartment. It felt strange to be back to normal life after so much adventure and drama. "It's smaller than I remembered," observed Emily, looking around the apartment. "The island got us used to open spaces," said Jennifer, laughing. "Do you miss the island?" asked Emily. "A little," admitted Jennifer. "That's where we met some very special people. Will we visit Margaret sometimes?" "Of course," promised Jennifer. On their first night back home, Jennifer could hardly believe she was truly free and reunited with her daughter. Everything seemed almost too good to be true. "Mom," said Emily before bed, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, honey." "I was never scared," said Emily. "Even when we were running, I knew you would protect me." "How did you know?" asked Jennifer emotionally. "Because you always protect," said Emily simply. "That's what mothers do." Jennifer hugged her daughter, feeling immense gratitude for having regained not just legal custody, but also the opportunity to continue being the mother Emily deserved. A few weeks later, Stephanie called with news about the investigation. "Richard Anderson was arrested," she announced. "Finally!" exclaimed Jennifer. "And it wasn't just him," continued Stephanie. "We uncovered an entire corruption network involving doctors, courthouse staff, even some judges." "How many people?" 16 so far," said Stephanie, "and there might be more." "And the victims? Were they all rehabilitated?" "Most of them, yes," confirmed Stephanie. "Robert and Susan had their situations completely resolved. Other similar cases are being reviewed too. Stephanie, how can I thank you for everything you've done?" "Keep being a good mother to Emily," said Stephanie. "That's the best gratitude." "And Margaret, how is she?" "Working with me on the investigation and loving it," said Stephanie, laughing. "She has a natural talent for detecting judicial corruption." "And her own children? Did they try to reconcile?" "Not yet," said Stephanie sadly. "But Margaret says she's at peace with the situation. She's a very strong woman." "Yes, she is," agreed Stephanie, "and a great inspiration to all of us." 6 months later, Jennifer was back to her routine as a teacher when she received an unexpected invitation. Margaret was organizing a gathering of all the families who had been helped by the investigation. "Will it be on the island?" asked Jennifer when she called Margaret. "No," laughed Margaret. "At an event venue on the mainland. There are many families now." "Emily will be excited to see everyone," said Jennifer. "And I can't wait to see how much she's grown," said Margaret. The gathering was emotional. Jennifer saw Robert and Susan, who had reconciled with their daughter and regained their relationship with their grandchildren. She met other families who had gone through similar situations and had also been helped by the investigation. "It's amazing how many similar stories," observed one of the mothers present. "And to think that if Jennifer hadn't escaped to the island, we might never have discovered the truth," said another. Margaret approached Jennifer during the party. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Grateful," said Jennifer simply. "Grateful for finding the courage to fight, for finding you on the island, for finding people like Stephanie. And grateful for having an amazing daughter," added Margaret, watching Emily play with the other children present. "Especially for that," Jennifer agreed. "Jennifer," said Margaret, "can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Finding you on the island reminded me why it's important to fight for justice," Margaret said. "You gave me a purpose again." "You saved us," said Jennifer. "We saved each other," Margaret corrected. Stephanie appeared beside them. "How's our heroine?" she asked, referring to Jennifer. "Just a mother who did what any mother would do," Jennifer said modestly. "Not every mother would have had the courage to take on a corrupt system," Stephanie observed. Not every mother would have found such powerful allies, Jennifer countered. Speaking of allies, said Stephanie, I have news. What? Asked Jennifer and Margaret. Your case has become a reference, Stephanie said. Other prosecutors in different states are using our methods to investigate similar corruption networks. Does that mean more families will be helped? Asked Jennifer. Dozens, maybe hundreds, Stephanie confirmed. Jennifer felt a deep satisfaction knowing that her suffering had contributed to protecting other families from similar experiences. Mommy, said Emily, running up to her, Aunt Margaret said we can visit the island on vacation. Did she really? Asked Jennifer, looking at Margaret. If you want to, said Margaret. It would be good to show Emily how the island is now. How is it? The fishermen built a small inn, Margaret explained. Families who need peace and quiet can stay there. A therapeutic inn? Asked Stephanie, interested. Something like that, said Margaret, for people recovering from traumatic situations. That's a wonderful idea, said Jennifer. And you help manage it? Asked Stephanie. When I'm not working on the investigation with you, Margaret confirmed. Jennifer smiled, seeing how Margaret had transformed her own painful experience into multiple ways to help others. At the end of the party, all the families gathered for a group photo. There were about 20 families, all united by the common experience of having been victims of corruption and having found the strength to fight. This photo should go to the newspapers, observed one of the mothers. To show that justice is possible when people come together, agreed another. Stephanie had an idea. How about we organize an awareness campaign, she suggested, to warn other families about the signs of judicial manipulation. That's a great idea, said Margaret. We could create a website with information and resources. And a hotline for reports, added Robert. Would you be willing to get involved in this? Asked Stephanie. Of course, Jennifer said immediately. If our story can help other people, we want to share it. 2 years later, the awareness campaign had become a non-governmental organization that helped families in similar situations across the country. Jennifer worked as a volunteer on weekends, while Margaret had become the general coordinator. I never imagined our desperate escape would turn into this, Jennifer commented during a meeting of the organization. The best social changes start with ordinary people who refuse to accept injustices, said Margaret. Stephanie, who now led a national task force against judicial corruption, agreed. You proved that a single family willing to fight can change the entire system, she said. And that deserted islands can be the place where we find our strength, added Jennifer, laughing. Emily, now 10 years old, often accompanied her mother in the organization's activities. She had become a sort of mascot for the group, representing all the children who had been protected by their joint work. Mommy, Emily said one day, when I grow up I want to work helping families like you do. Are you sure? Asked Jennifer. I am, said Emily determinedly. I don't want any child to have to go through what we went through. You're already helping, said Jennifer proudly. Just by existing and being happy, you show that it's worth fighting for. And when we tell our story to other people, they see that it's possible to overcome, added Emily wisely. Jennifer hugged her daughter, amazed by the girl's maturity and compassion. Emily had not only survived the traumatic experience, but had become a more empathetic person because of it. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, 3 years after the original escape, Jennifer and Emily were calmly sailing toward the island, no longer as desperate fugitives, but as visitors carrying gratitude. The island now housed a small inn that welcomed families in recovery. Margaret had transformed the place that once represented escape into a symbol of new beginnings and hope. Remember the first time we saw this island? Asked Jennifer as they sailed. I remember you were very scared, said Emily, and I was curious. And now? Now I'm happy, said Emily simply, because I know everything turned out well. For us, and for many other families, added Jennifer. Mommy, said Emily, watching the island approach, thank you for fighting for me. Thank you for giving me the strength to fight, replied Jennifer. When they reached the beach, Margaret was waiting for them with a radiant smile. At her feet was a small pile of colorful shells. Emily, I saved these for you, said Margaret, pointing to the shells. Thank you, exclaimed Emily, running to examine the treasures. How is our refuge island? asked Jennifer, hugging Margaret. Prosperous, said Margaret proudly. Last month we hosted 5 families who needed time to heal. And did they all manage to? They all left stronger, confirmed Margaret. There's something magical about this place. There is, agreed Jennifer, looking around. Here we learned that sometimes you have to get lost to find yourself, and that the most terrible storms can lead to the most beautiful new beginnings, added Margaret. Emily came running back with an especially beautiful shell. Look at this, she said excitedly. It has all the colors of the rainbow. It's perfect, said Jennifer, like our story. How so? Asked Emily. It started dark and stormy, but ended full of colors and hope, explained Jennifer. And it helped many people, added Margaret. Like a rainbow after the rain, philosophized Emily. The 3 sat on the beach sand, watching the sunset paint the sky with golden and pink colors. It was a perfect moment of peace and gratitude. Margaret, said Jennifer, if you could go back in time, would you do anything differently? Margaret thought for a moment. Maybe I would have found the courage to fight sooner, she said finally. But I wouldn't change the fact that I found you. Neither would I, said Jennifer. Our journey was difficult, but it led us to amazing people and a life with purpose. And it taught me that the most important adventures are the ones we take for love, added Emily. Wise words from a 10-year-old girl, said Margaret, laughing. Words from a survivor, corrected Jennifer proudly. When the sun had completely set, they returned to the small inn where they would spend the night. It was simple but cozy, and other families who were recovering from their own battles greeted them warmly. It's beautiful to see how this place has become a symbol of hope for so many people, observed Jennifer. Every family that comes through here takes a bit of the island's strength with them, said Margaret, and leaves a bit of their own strength for those who come next. Like a big chain of support, said Emily. Exactly, agreed Margaret. That night, Jennifer fell asleep to the familiar sound of the waves, thinking about how her life had completely transformed. From a desperate woman fleeing with her daughter, she had become an active advocate for family rights. The next morning, before they left, Emily wanted to take one last walk on the beach to collect shells. These are to give as gifts to the children at school, she explained, to tell our story. Do you like telling our story? Asked Jennifer. I do, said Emily, because it shows that even when things get really bad, there's always hope. And that with the right people by our side, we can overcome anything, added Jennifer. And that sometimes what seems like the end is actually the beginning, Emily finished, repeating one of Margaret's favorite sayings. During the trip back to the mainland, Jennifer reflected on everything she had learned. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of fear. Strength didn't come from solitude, but from community. And justice wasn't a given, but something that had to be constantly fought for. What are you thinking about? Asked Emily, noticing her mother's contemplative silence. I'm thinking about how lucky we are, said Jennifer. Lucky? Because we found people like Margaret, Stephanie, Robert, and Susan, Jennifer explained. Because we discovered we weren't alone. And because we have each other, added Emily. Mostly that, agreed Jennifer, hugging her daughter. When they arrived home later that day, there was a message from Stephanie on the answering machine. Jennifer, call when you get in. I have news about a new case that might need your help. Jennifer smiled. Another family needed support, another chance to turn a painful experience into strength to help others. Are we going to help more people? Asked Emily, who had heard the message. If they want our help, said Jennifer. We always want to help, said Emily determinedly. Always, agreed Jennifer. And so, the story that had begun with a desperate escape became an ongoing mission of support and protection for families in similar situations. The island that had once been a refuge became a symbol of new beginnings, and the women who had once met as fugitives became warriors for justice. Jennifer called Stephanie back and heard about a new family that needed help. A mother and 2 children who were facing a very similar manipulative family situation to their own experience. They're scared and don't know who to trust, explained Stephanie. We'll meet with them, said Jennifer immediately, and we'll show them they're not alone. Are you sure? I know you just got back from the island. "I'm sure," said Jennifer. "This is what we're here for." "This is what we're here for," repeated Stephanie with admiration. And so it was that a desperate mother who had fled to an island with her daughter became the first person other desperate mothers turned to for help. Her story of escape had transformed into a story of struggle, and her experience of isolation had become a support network that grew every day. Years later, when Emily was a young adult studying law to follow in Stephanie and Margaret's footsteps, she would write about that period of her childhood as the moment that defined her values for life. "My mother taught me that true love sometimes means fighting against the whole world," wrote Emily in her college admission essay. "Margaret taught me that wisdom comes from experience, and Stephanie taught me that a determined person can change the system. But the island taught me that sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves." And when Jennifer Miller read that essay, she knew that all the tears, all the fear, all the struggle had been worth it. Not just because she had gotten her daughter back, but because she had raised a young woman determined to protect other families from going through what they went through. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you think Jennifer made the right decision? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.